Story 1. Materialism and constant advertisements encourage people to buy more products that do not necessarily make them happier. Story 2. Idolizing politicians or treating them like celebrities is unnecessary. At the end of the day, they are just trying to keep their jobs and get paid. Story 3. 1. Anti-intellectualism. 2. Proud ignorance. 3. Inability to accept being wrong. 4. Normalized selfishness. 5. Tipping. Story 4. Tipping. Health insurance is tied to a job. Otherwise, it costs $750 a month for a terrible plan to survive. Also, check your mirrors and do not sit in the left lane. Story 5. There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there has always been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. Isaac Asimov. Story 6. Teachers are supposed to be the most respected profession in a functioning society alongside medical doctors and law enforcement officers. It is shocking how indifferent we are towards the people who spend more time with children than their parents. Story 7. Nothing other than complete domination of an industry is seen as success. God forbid a company is run to have reasonable profits for the sake of filling a need in a community and providing for its workers and owners. It must extract every cent possible for maximum profits at all times. Story 8. Tipping. We all know it has gotten out of hand and does not work for its original purpose. Being prepared to fight in public is madness. The rise of hustle culture and the glamorization of the gangster rap lifestyle creates negative influences. Story 9. We accept corporate rule as law. There is no guaranteed vacation or maternity leave. Basic rights that other countries recognize are denied as we allow our corporate leaders to act as if the economy would collapse. Story 10. Misguided patriotism supports destructive policies that go against everything the country was founded on. Proud ignorance often accompanies this but is a separate problem. The belief in exceptionalism assumes no other country or idea could be better than ours, eliminating the need for improvement. There is a denial of hard truths, an effort to hide our past because it makes people uncomfortable. Of course it does. That is what makes us great, to learn from it, not to hide it. No one is supposed to feel good about slavery. It was very bad. We fought a war over it and killed each other in the hundreds of thousands. It should be well remembered. Story 11. Everything is so commercial. Do you have a baby coming? Throw a party. Do you know what the baby's sex is going to be? Another party. Hey, it's early November. Let's start broadcasting Christmas specials already. Sorry, I don't get it. Story 12. Many Americans perceive what is considered far left in the United States to be center or center-right in other parts of the world. The politics of the United States are so skewed rightward that anything not effectively oppressive to the poor is considered communism. Story 13. Evangelical Christianity. American evangelicalism is so stultifying. The morality is flattened, distorted, and nauseating, and it is exported everywhere. The more I see of it, the more I think it is the most toxic force in American culture. Tipping is dumb. I hate it, even though I have done well working for tips, but it is fundamentally a stupid way to pay people. Gun culture also stresses me out. I do not know why people need to base their personalities around the Second Amendment. Story 14. Honestly, we are the opposite of civic-minded. We are selfish and often unkind to people, both Americans and others. Story 15. The United States centrism many people have involves only knowing United States history and not realizing when something is specific to United States culture and not universal. Story 16. All the gangster wannabes and hood types. You are not cool, you make the general public uncomfortable, and usually they are really uneducated. Glorifying being a drug dealer or killer is also lame. Story 17. The refusal of United States culture to truly understand its history. America has done great things. America has also done terrible things. Many of the United States' dealings with Central and South America fall into this latter category. While this part of the world has been meddled in constantly, it is far from alone. Understanding these interventions is key to understanding why many places are as they are and hate who they hate. Despite that, much of American culture, especially during the Cold War and from the political right, leans heavily on sanitizing American history. There have been open fights about how much slavery can be discussed in schools. This reinforces the idea that America is good, and therefore everything it does must be good. Even when America had problems, they are seen as part of the past. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr. are depicted only in the most narrow light, most acceptable to the establishment. The truth is that nearly every country in the world has dark spots. It is not easy for anyone, and some countries more than most. All countries struggle with understanding their history. Sometimes this is because the government refuses to acknowledge what happened. But while that is part of it, America seems to be a place where non-government actors have also bought into this sanitized version of history. This is evident in grassroots opposition to more honest retellings of history. By refusing to truly understand or address where it has failed, America prevents itself from becoming better. In contrast, by perpetuating the blind idea of its own righteousness, the country is doomed to repeat the same mistakes again and again. Story 18. Tipping at restaurants and everywhere. Popularity of extreme right-wing ideology. Flag, military, and police worship. Need to own a car in most places. Not very supportive of walkable or bikeable infrastructure. Lack of care or support for people with mental or health problems, age, or disability. Basically, if you cannot support yourself and pay for your own medical and housing expenses, you are out of luck. Story 19. The United States values liberty and freedom of choice, and we are a society of individualism, unlike China, which is a collectivist society. Both sides of the spectrum have pros and cons. The best parts of United States culture come from that freedom and individualism, but so do the worst parts. Focusing on the original poster's question of what annoys me, it's the negative side of individualism. Everyone looks out for themselves and often disregards others and society at large. This shows up in traffic where people actively make conditions worse, slower, and more dangerous just to cut someone off and move up a fraction of a second faster toward their destination. People weave through traffic, creating chaos and increasing everyone's chance of crashes, injuries, or death due to their selfish need to get through the same traffic as everyone else. Instead of working together to move smoothly, which would be faster and clear traffic better for everyone, each person tries to cut others off so they get ahead. This actually slows the entire roadway because of the basic principle of progressive braking through traffic. It is the same as visiting New York City and seeing all the trash, littering, and vandalism. People make their whole community uglier, dirtier, and worse because they think, everyone else can deal with it. I'll dump my trash here because it's easier for me. Or, I will tag this bridge because I want attention. This focus on me has benefits in many other aspects of life, but as shown, it also harms society and costs us more in other ways. Story 20. Everything is turned into a competition or contest and you have to pick sides. Why is hot dog eating a contest? You have stripped the entire essence of eating a hot dog, which is for sustenance or flavor, and now you are gulping down wet bread and meat devoid of any flavor just to prove you can eat more. Why? To what end? Story 21. The fact that too many Americans confuse wealth with virtue. That homeless man who is begging on the street must have done something wrong. That billionaire who makes his wealth from the suffering of others deserves that money. It is idolatry at its most basic, and it is disgusting. Story 22. Ignorance exists on both sides. The right and left are full of overzealous, uneducated, misinformed, and ignorant people who cannot be bothered to question even the worst lies as long as they fit their narrative. My favorite example is being a member of the National Guard during the Minneapolis riots. Watching the crowd act like a barn full of turkeys when one of them said something was entertaining. However, I saw how mentally disturbed many were when another company of soldiers approached our position so we could take a break and eat. The number of people who started screaming and crying, saying that they were the death squad and were there to kill them all, was very concerning. It quickly became clear that we were not dealing with mature individuals. No amount of explaining that they were just replacing us so we could rest could stop their cries of impending murder and torture. I have a very negative view of any popular protest because I know who is involved, and it is not just the left side either. Story 23. Individualism. People here want to be a part of a community so badly without actually taking the steps to build one. The minute someone is inconvenienced, it is game over for anything to get done. Story 24. The trend of people hating the problems but also hating the solutions. For example, bad health insurance leads to the argument that Medicare for all would never work. No time off work results in the belief that people do not deserve guaranteed time off. Endless wars cause some to claim that this war is justified. Story 25. The arrogance and ignorance. The superiority complex that they are better than anywhere else. The lack of education or awareness of anything outside their own city, state, or bubble. Even the Democrats have some of this. For many, especially in the southern United States, the religion is cult-like. Story 26. Have you seen the United States recently? It is a chaotic situation run by criminals, traitors, and terrorists. Not to mention the most foolish people you have ever seen. Story 27. The pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality and the entire culture around work persist while many people work hard for those who do not. Story 28. Two Americans with public school education and a podcast addiction, each claiming the other is brainwashed. Story 29. Anti-intellectualism and the pervasive tendency to flatten complexity and reduce all phenomena to Boolean logic interactions. Over-personalizing and individualizing systems that demand a more holistic analysis, including in politics. Toxic optimism and positivity, aligned with the above. The elevation of software engineering to the exclusion of other professions, a consequence of the above, particularly the first point. These factors combine to create a hyper-atomized, incurious, incomplete society that is unable to understand the problems it faces, much less organized to fix them. Story 30. Oh boy. Not like I've been sitting on this for a while, but I'll try to take a stab at it. There's a persistent mismatch between what this country says it values, freedom, opportunity, progress, and what it actually rewards, conformity, consumption, and corner cutting. I don't hate the United States, but I feel like I live in a system that's chronically allergic to introspection. Then I had the AI summarize one of my discussions as I try to navigate my own thoughts and feelings, where I'm trying to find peace and happiness from within instead of expecting it from elsewhere. Performative progress. We love the idea of improvement but rarely care about results. Infrastructure gets torn up and repaved worse. Companies cut costs to meet profit goals, then implode under their own short-sightedness. Progress is measured in metrics, not meaning. It's all about the motion of progress, not the actual progress. Public stupidity meets private entitlement. It's less about raw intelligence and more about a cultural allergy to critical thinking or spatial awareness. People park their carts sideways in aisles, block intersections, then get mad when you don't praise their obliviousness. This isn't exclusive to America. However, our car-dependent society makes it increasingly difficult to safely navigate roads where giant Ford F-150 trucks are cutting across lanes of traffic or pushing cyclists off the road because these people hate cyclists. Urban design by masochists. Why build roundabouts or efficient transit when we can just paint a line on the road and call it a bike lane? Bonus points for traffic lights that seem to be timed by someone throwing darts blindfolded. I think my daily driving time could be reduced by 40% if road infrastructure had some intellectually designed features. Hyper-individualism on steroids. Decades of political conditioning have turned community into a dirty word. Anything remotely collective, education, healthcare, basic safety nets, is labeled socialism and rejected out of reflex. The result? People adhere to their political party like it's a sports team. United States politics is looking more and more cult-like each year, with networks like Fox News pushing any story narrative they want to keep people upset at the enemy. Ads everywhere. Advertising isn't a background annoyance. It's the soundtrack of American life. You can't watch a 10-minute video without being held hostage by 4 ad breaks trying to sell you hair gummies, a virtual private network, and freedom in a can. Every screen is a billboard. Every moment monetized. Every little moment is a grand event with some kind of product being marketed to you. Government as an extraction tool. Congress isn't dysfunctional. It's functioning perfectly for the people it was built to serve. Spoiler. Not you. Cut education, cut healthcare, cut municipal budgets. Just don't touch corporate subsidies or billionaire tax shelters. Upward mobility. That ladder was sold for scrap. Cultural regression disguised as nostalgia. Racism and misogyny didn't go away, they just got new public relations teams. I genuinely thought we had made great progress since the 1950s, but seeing the amount of hate coming out of the woodwork now that former President Trump and the grand old party have made it okay is sickening and a large part of why I don't feel connected with America anymore. Story 31. The America is the best at all things across all time attitude persists despite the clearly obvious and data-validated evidence to the contrary. There is also the defensiveness of Americans when this is pointed out. Additionally, there is a culture of Christians and conservatives who do not follow through on their stated beliefs. Why must I keep pretending that bigots are not simply ignorant people with poor personal character? Whether it is race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, or immigration status, hate is not politics or faith. It is ignorance and cowardice. Furthermore, there is a business culture that prioritizes shareholder returns above all else at any cost. Story 32. Being unaware of global events, especially during worldwide issues, can lead to misunderstandings. For example, blaming the current president for problems like inflation or gas prices when these are global issues, or believing that COVID-19 was a government conspiracy in the United States while ignoring that the entire world was affected. Story 33. Everything has to be a hustle. Can people just have hobbies without immediately focusing on how much money they can make from them? Story 34. The car culture. I want to be able to safely ride my bicycle around, not have a 2-foot wide bike lane at best as cars whiz by within a foot of me going 60 miles per hour. And public transit. The United States built the first and largest rail system in the world in the 1800s and then let it rot and dismantled it. Story 35. Constantly saying the United States is the best country in the world, usually said by people who do not even own a passport. Best for what? Medical bankruptcy rates? Incarceration rates? National debt? Story 36. I'm Italian. Someone you are distantly related to moved here from Italy 100 years ago. You are American. You are American. Story 37. I am not a fan of using public transportation and worrying that the nervous person beside me has a hidden weapon and might harm me if their day went badly. I am also not a fan of people telling me that I am overreacting when I say this, because that is exactly how it feels coming from another country. Story 38. Americans will make everything a political issue. Oh, you like football? Who did you vote for so I know whether I like football? Story 39. Bumper stickers. This unnecessary need to tell strangers that your child plays lacrosse at Lincoln High School. We do not care. Story 40. Circumcision. While it used to be common in Canada, it is no longer the norm, although it remains a concern, just not as severe as in the United States. I am truly horrified that anyone thinks it is acceptable to sexually mutilate children. It is extremely painful, worsens sexual experience and masturbation, and results in the deaths of several hundred infants every year. Even if the claims of reduced risk of sexually transmitted infections were true, it would not justify such a barbaric practice. Furthermore, it completely disregards the consent of the individual, as the penis belongs to the person, not their parents. Circumcision should be illegal, and I will do whatever I can to stop it. Before anyone asks, I have undergone foreskin restoration myself. Story 41. If you have an opinion on anything, you are automatically categorized into one of two sides rather than any nuance. Story 42. I do not know. There is a lot I do not like, but for all I know, any answer I have to this will elicit a response like, we have that in another country too. Story 43. Competitive eating. Even when you put aside the ethical considerations of a single person consuming 15,000 calories in one sitting, it is just gross and unnecessary. Story 44. Spending money they do not have, borrowing money they cannot repay, tipping, and fixation on the stock market. Story 45. Tipping. Companies refuse to pay their employees a proper wage, so the consumer has to do it for them. It is wild and does not make sense. I still tip because I have to respect the culture. However, that does not mean I do not have my gripes with it. Story 46. How superficial the friendliness is. People will say, "We should hang out sometime," only to not mean it. Story 47. The lack of accountability on the global stage is evident. Everything America does wrong gets tied to the current president. And when that president's term ends, those wrongdoings become ancient history and are no longer considered the country's responsibility. I guarantee that once Donald Trump is out, the rest of the world will be expected to pretend the trade war never happened. Story 48. People will claim to be part of a religion without reading the holy book or even knowing where the closest house of worship is. This is not limited to Christianity. Story 49. Everything related to car culture. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about gearheads, people who like road trips, or similar interests. That's all cool. The community that just likes geeking out about machines is cool. What I mean is the idea that our towns need to be catered toward cars. Everything needs to be wide and far apart and have plenty of parking. I hate this so much. Things used to be so much more human-scaled. Now we're all just isolated in our houses with big yards and cars. The idea that dense cities are gross and violent is largely untrue. Rural areas often have higher homicide and drug overdose rates than most neighborhoods in big cities. There are exceptions. Urban blight definitely exists, but it is greatly exaggerated in our media. Story 50. Right immediately above this question in my feed is an item from the Albany subreddit titled, "Saratoga Springs proposes fines for people who sleep on the street." It is literally designed to punish people who are struggling. I strongly oppose this. Story 51. Schools focus more on knowledge rather than humility. It is through humility that we gain deeper understanding. Knowledge without understanding is meaningless. Story 52. Being surprised by consequences. Other countries have obesity, for instance, but I have never known an obese person in a non-United States nation to be surprised that their obesity caused diabetes and heart attacks. Only in America can people be overweight and be surprised that it worsens their health, or smoke and be shocked that they develop lung cancer. Story 53. Judging people based on political views is unnecessary. I rarely talk about politics because I grew up in a house where it was a taboo subject, similar to discussing money. I do not care who you voted for, what party you support, or what protests you attend. If you treat me and my family well, and we share similar interests, I can easily be friends with you. I hope you can feel the same way about me. I also do not watch or read the news because I genuinely do not care. I have more important things to focus on. Story 54. Make America Great Again and everything it stands for and does is directly tied to most of the worst aspects of United States culture. Story 55. Our affinity for cults of personality, whether those personalities are celebrities, athletes, or political figures. Our Puritan work ethic and, by extension, lack of vacation, homework-life balance, social support, and so on. Story 56. The idea that wealth is the sole measure of success in life. When my father passed, he was not a wealthy man. His estate consisted of a home that was paid off and some modest investments. But he had 3 children and 3 grandchildren, all of whom loved him dearly. 2 of the children are college graduates. All have happy marriages. When we were growing up, our lifestyle was comfortably middle class. We did not want for any necessities and had some nice things, could have a family vacation most years, and so on. But he also made sure we understood that there are people who were not so fortunate and that we had a duty to help them. After he retired, he spent a lot of time volunteering with various charities. His favorite was Habitat for Humanity, until Mom would not let him climb ladders anymore. He was a decent, loving man who believed in caring for his community and his family. I consider him far more of a success than some wealthy person who is entirely focused on making himself richer, with children who only pretend to care about him because they want to stay in the will. Story 57. The lack of interest of most people in what happens outside their borders, and their assumption that everything beyond is either bad or against them. Story 58. For some reason, your news needs to be entertaining to watch. It is the news. It does not have to be funny. What the hell? Story 59. Trying to buy a house in an economy where a corporation that has a $1 trillion market capitalization owns the house you want to buy. Story 60. Being a patriot has become taboo because some people on the right are actually jingoists. As a result, those who are true patriots and want to improve the country are unfairly labeled as communists. Story 61. I find that society has shifted too far toward an individualistic culture, where some people behave selfishly or rudely because they believe it is their right. Just because something is legal does not mean it is moral. Story 62. Hustle culture. Politics has become like rooting for a sports team. People call themselves patriotic when they are actually just toxically nationalistic. Story 63. Corporate culture and the phrase "here at X Corporation, we are all a big family," along with other similar statements used to guilt people into doing more than what they are strictly paid to do. Story 64. The general lack of interest in the rest of the world is noticeable. I understand that the United States is large and has many cultures within the country, but that does not excuse the lack of curiosity and knowledge about other parts of the world. Story 65. Car culture, suburban sprawl, and infrastructure entirely built around automobiles. In most places, you absolutely have to have an automobile in order to get anywhere or do anything. It is maddening. Story 66. Extreme car centrism. Hating society reframed as individualism. Prosperity gospel. Anti-intellectualism. Story 67. Political apathy of the general public and the belief that both sides are ineffective lead to low voter turnout. Approximately 36% of the United States voting population did not vote in 2024. Voter participation is even lower in state elections and significantly lower in local elections, which arguably have a greater impact on daily life. Story 68. The entire country revolves around the automobile industry and cars. I understand. It is a large country. Goods and people need to move around. People in Detroit need jobs. New and used car dealers occupy a dozen square blocks in every city. The infrastructure has been built but is steadily deteriorating. Instead of rebuilding, why do they not start shifting back to rail transportation? It all comes down to money, of course. Also, golf courses, poor education, and the political system contribute to the situation, if chaos can be called a system. Story 69. The idea that you are either the best in the world at something or you should not have even tried is the cause of many people's issues, starting with imposter syndrome and increasing from there. It has led many of my friends to refuse to do anything that is not effortless and to become hyper-competitive if anyone else is doing the same things they are. It is very toxic. I cannot stand watching it. My life improved greatly when I accepted that there are things I am good at, and that is more than enough. I do not need to be world-class. Story 70. Individualism. People in the United States can be selfish and petty for no reason. Why are you tossing trash on the ground when there is a trash can 5 feet from you? Why are you playing music on a speaker when using the subway? Why are you smoking in the park next to a mother with her child? Story 71. Legalized political corruption, corporate media, the surveillance state, and militarized police fetishization. Story 72. Lack of respect or courtesy for others. I have traveled to a few countries, and the number of people who litter or do not pick up after their dogs is very high in this country. Story 73. I get extremely frustrated with the stubbornness people have if you want to live a lifestyle that is not the exact status quo. Heaven forbid you want to be healthy and commute to work by bicycle. People are aggressive to you and act like you are being pretentious. Often, the infrastructure for anything that is not car by default is terrible, and people raise a huge fuss over wanting separated bike lanes or anything that threatens how much space is allocated for cars. It is always about tax money, and often people argue that the vast majority drives, so this is a waste of funding. But fewer people use other modes of transportation because it is patently unsafe in the first place. In almost any situation where a car hits someone, whether on a bike or on foot, people automatically protect the driver in comments. People even seem to have a violent fantasy of hitting a bike rider. It is genuinely disgusting. This is such a fringe opinion that I end up feeling depressed about any chance that things will change. Why people so strongly want to hold this position is unknown to me. I feel like driving is a miserable experience for the vast majority of people, who are always grumpy about other drivers and road conditions. Story 74. I would say that the idea that bigger is always better is flawed. It is evident in houses where people prioritize square footage over quality, big trucks used just to go to work and the grocery store, and restaurants that prefer offering larger quantities of lower quality food because it is considered a good deal. Story 75. Rugged individualism is the idea that an individual can be completely self-reliant, making educated decisions about health, taxes, retirement, education, and more. Many of our problems arise because we have been led to believe that each individual can make proper decisions about complex matters for which they have no real knowledge or training. Story 76. The whole emphasis on independence and self-reliance leads to shaming people who need or want help. Story 77. The America is the world or America is best mentality refers to the idea of America being the shining city on the hill. In hindsight, I could have probably just said, American exceptionalism. Story 78. Individualism. For many people, if something does not directly harm or benefit them, they could not care less. Also, some people would rather burn alive than ask anyone for help. Story 79. Rampant consumerism. Extreme independence to the point where the only person that matters is each individual, leading to no taking responsibility for actions. Story 80. Anti-intellectual, puritanical, tribal, fake religious, materialistic, short-sighted, selfish, skewed values, lack of clarity, pro-death, pro-violence, oligarchy-loving, uninsightful, oblivious to own self-interest. Story 81. A nation full of people calling themselves Christians who do not want poor children to have food, healthcare, or housing. Apparently, Jesus hated taxes, so that means their tax money should not be used to help people. Because Jesus would never want to force anyone to be altruistic. I also dislike how if a rich person says something you agree with, all of a sudden they are considered smart, as if it is impossible to be super wealthy without intelligence or common sense. Story 82. There is no sense of community if it involves any kind of work or sacrifice, or if there is nothing to gain. Story 83. I do not know if it is the culture, but people are using personal freedom as a reason to ignore social responsibility, for example, refusing to wear a mask when they are sick with coronavirus disease 2019. Story 84. The rugged individualist trope is perpetuated by culture. No man is an island, and we are social animals by evolution. There is much loneliness and isolation. Story 85. Nearly $3 billion of fireworks are spent every 4th of July while people are in need. Isolationism. The Pledge of Allegiance, sometimes called the Pledge of Brainwashed Obedience. Puppet dictators installed. Violence. Guns. A belief in the greatest country myth. Story 86. The strange faces, the screams, and the social media-obsessed life. I have a theory that the United States population was deteriorated by external forces using the internet, and now they behave unpredictably. Story 87. Viewing things like housing, access to health care, and other social support systems as a privilege, not a basic human right. Story 88. Feminism. I don't know if it is the same in the United States as it is in other countries, but they have really destroyed what original feminism was. It is now something that, as a woman, I do not want to be a part of. Story 89. Gun enthusiast culture. Not referring to your average gun owner, but those whose entire personality revolves around owning guns. These are individuals with dozens of firearms who are neither collectors nor competition shooters, but who simply own them. Story 90. Our media and entertainment are filled with angry men fulfilling violent revenge fantasies, killing and maiming everyone around them, and feeling good about it. We are in serious trouble. Story 91. 1. What about me? Attitude. 2. Americans often label everything they dislike as a medical condition, whether it is an allergy, a rare phobia they read about online, or a mysterious illness that becomes part of their identity. Story 92. Lack of community due to dominant car culture. Many Americans are socially isolated because of this atomization, Extremely performative culture. Many Americans act like what they see on television and internet media. It is tiresome and inhumane. This leads to an unacceptably high number of people treating others like sources of entertainment or products. Anti-urbanism, anti-intellectualism, and anti-progressive attitudes are very common. Reactionary rather than critical political discourse due to media overexposure. Many Americans, including most conservatives and supporters of Make America Great Again, only care about making the opposition look bad. There are no other thoughts. This is how political entertainment networks prime people to think, and it is effective. As a result, there is very little room for critical analysis of society and how to improve it. We are completely stalled. Story 93. Abbreviations without any context can be confusing, especially when it comes to movie titles. As a non-native English speaker, sometimes I do not even understand what people are talking about. Story 94. The ideas surrounding work include the outdated stigma against changing jobs frequently. There is a belief that since a company pays your bills, you should be completely loyal to it. Another misconception is that no matter how hard you work or what you do to make ends meet, if you are poor, it is because you are lazy. Story 95. Hustle culture, emotional detachment viewed as strength, commodifying everything, pretending to be empathetic while many feel the opposite, hypocrisy, toxic individualism. Story 96. How uptight everyone is about nudity. I have traveled around the world, and Americans just have this belief that nudity is bad. Story 97. I was actually forced to attend a Trump and Make America Great Again themed wedding. It was wild. Who does this? Other supporters. Story 98. How tipping is not number one here amazes me. But yes, gun culture, treating political parties like sports teams, being overly religious and letting it drive politics. Story 99. Healthcare for profit. If you work for a company that denies claims for profit, I believe your actions are unethical. Story 100. We are the greatest country on earth versus how many Americans have been out of state, much less across the border. Story 101. They think they are the center of the world, the center of the internet. They assume everyone online is from the United States of America. To be fair, many of them do not even realize they do it. Story 102. Many rude, loud, obnoxious, poorly educated, entitled United States tourists are reinforcing that stereotype of Americans. Story 103. Artificial tanning seriously looks awful and does not look natural at all. You literally turn orange from that substance, and on top of it all, it causes cancer. Story 104. All of it. The older I get, the more I resent the culture I was born into. Selfishness, ignorance, consumerism, capitalism, sexism, racism, xenophobia, worship of money, shallow egomania. That is our culture. It is beyond annoying. It is shameful and disgusting. Story 105. We love alcohol. Did you know there is an opioid crisis currently ongoing? Opiates kill fewer people per year than alcohol does. There is a serious crisis of opioids, but alcohol causes widespread harm. Alcohol is a hard drug. It is not called that because sales would decline if it were. The only reason alcohol is not considered a hard drug is that it is not scary to ingest. It looks frightening to inject or smoke from foil, but it seems acceptable to drink. Story 106. The obsession with rugged individualism and the perception that certain jobs are lower imply that people are only as valuable as their jobs. Story 107. Hyperfixation on individualism. The culture of worship surrounding the almighty dollar. Infrastructural development designed around necessitating a depreciating asset, to name a few. Story 108. Just the general American exceptionalism. The only things America has more of than anywhere else are incarcerated people and school shootings. Story 109. Individualism versus social collectivism as seen abroad. In the United States, it is often focused on self-interest and individual success. It is fine to be self-sufficient, but it is important to also consider and support your neighbors. Society is not just about individual gain. Story 110. Elderly, wealthy white men controlling the government and evading consequences due to their status. Story 111. When I traveled to Japan and returned to America, I was quite annoyed at how selfish and loud many Americans are. People in Japan are polite, quiet, wait their turn in line, clean up after themselves, follow rules, and take care of things that do not belong to them. In my hometown of Chicago, people litter, drink, smoke cigarettes, and play loud music on the train. This behavior would never be tolerated in Japan or probably many other countries. Chicago is considered one of the better, cleaner cities in the United States, yet it still has these issues. Many people here are raised with no sense of shame, and it shows through entitled and self-centered behavior. As much as I want to call it out and wish society would address it, I do not want to risk getting hurt in the process. Story 112. Lack of leave or vacation. Focus on work or career. Car-centric. Ignorance is both celebrated and rewarded. Racism. Thinking money might make right. Story 113. The near worship of sports is excessive. Sports are fine in their place, but the attitude towards them is completely unreasonable. Story 114. I am not American but have visited many cities. Mainly, I noticed the car culture, especially how unwalkable many cities are and how little public transportation much of it has. I also observed the culture of individualism over community and the tipping culture. Story 115. Not caring about anything other than the United States. I had a coworker tell me she thought World War II ended in 1994. When I told her it ended in 1945, she said no one cares because it only happened in Germany. Story 116. Not knowing about United States or world history that provides context for relatively recent events that actually affect us. Story 117. Pay-to-play justice and healthcare systems. A deeply rooted, distorted, and disturbing sense of self. A lack of collective organization for the common good. Puritanism and the irony of it. Story 118. Constantly being on in corporate culture. I am a person who needs to recharge and not have work infiltrate my weekends. Story 119. 1. The popularization of going to bars or bar hopping on the weekends to escape a difficult job or poor work-life balance, and the culture normalizing the idea that it is acceptable to be a functional alcoholic because it only happens 2 days a week, so it is not considered a drinking problem. Being seen as strange if you drink milk or if you do not drink coffee every day as an adult. The need for a subscription or to create an account using your email for almost every website, even if you only use it once and never return. Self-checkouts remain common, but many miss having a cashier ring up groceries and dislike having cameras pointed at them from all angles when buying simple items like bread and candy. Story 120. The obsession with materialism, holidays, children being used to take away my rights, billionaires, workaholism, and capitalism makes me feel out of place in my own homeland. Story 121. Talking about oneself nonstop is discouraged. Avoid using the pronoun I excessively as I was taught during my childhood in school. I do not know if this is still taught today. Story 122. When Americans assume they are the only people on the internet. When I chat on any online forum, Americans almost always assume I am also American. This has led to some hilarious fights. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.